Politics Live.
It's Thursday, it's 12:15 and we're live in Westminster.
What I can confirm is that a future Conservative government will not increase income tax, national insurance or VAT.
I'll give you the very direct answer. Will income tax, national insurance or VAT increase under a future Labour government? No.
The parties make big promises on tax. Can we believe them? Long-time Labour MP Diane Abbott claims the party is carrying out a cull of left-wing candidates.
They just want me excluded from Parliament.
The situation in relation to Diane Abbott is that no decision has been taken to bar her.
Another day, another Ed Davey election stunt. But is it working? And we speak to the Greens. Can this be a breakthrough election for them? Joining us today, former Conservative Cabinet Minister John Whittingdale, Shadow Business Minister Rushanara Ali, Liberal Democrat Munira Wilson and Daily Telegraph columnist Annabel Denham. This is Politics Live, Election 2024. Welcome to viewers on BBC Two, BBC News and the iPlayer. Parliament has been dissolved, which means our politicians, our guests here, are no longer MPs, but candidates, ordinary members of the public, standing for election in their respective constituencies for their respective parties. But they're welcome all the same. Let's start with tax and spend and this headline on BBC News. Labour and Tories rule out raising VAT after election. Well, the debate on the economy on tax and spend was started by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, writing today, promising a Conservative government, you heard him in the headlines, would not raise any of the headline taxes. He claimed Labour does, however, have a plan to raise VAT. This, of course, is a classic election strategy to try and expose hidden plans by your rivals during the campaign. But Labour have quashed them and said, ruled out, as you also heard in the headlines, raising any of the headline taxes either. So, and the Liberal Democrats have too, I should say. So my opening question, starting with you, John Whittingdale, is why should people trust you on tax?
Well, because the Conservative Party has always believed in lower taxes. We've always stood for lower taxes. And one of the fundamental differences between a Labour government and a Conservative government has always been that Labour governments want to spend more. They try to avoid saying where the money is coming from, but they will find a way of putting up your taxes one way or another. There are ways, we already know. They're going to put VAT on school fees. They're going to have green levies. So even if they rule out one or two, they will be looking around in order to put up taxes because that is what Labour governments do. Right,
but the word believe, as you have just used, is doing the heavy lifting here, because the truth and the reality, so that our viewers know, is that taxes have gone up under Conservative governments. And as a result of freezing tax thresholds since 2021 and continuing with that until 2028, 4 million more people will be paying tax who weren't before, and 3 million more will pay the higher rate of income tax. So I ask you again, why should people trust you on tax?
Well, because we still believe in lower taxes, and we have begun to deliver that. As you saw in the budget with the cuts in national insurance contributions, but Conservative Party also believes in sound finance. We believe in getting the economy right. We had to spend a great deal of money to get this country through the COVID pandemic, to protect people from energy price rises, and that did result in borrowing. And of course, we need to get that down as well.
Rushanara, why should voters trust you and the Labour Party on the issue of tax and spend?
Well, look, what you have to look at is the evidence. We've had the highest tax burden for decades under the Conservatives. We've seen chronic waste of public money. We've seen fraudulent loans.
My question is, why should we trust what Labour says about not increasing taxes?
We have set out very clearly fully costed plans against policies that we have announced. We have been absolutely clear that every single policy we've introduced is costed. Unlike the Conservatives, they have made £71 billion worth of unfunded commitments already. Already, which includes national insurance, scrapping national insurance, and a whole bunch of other policies. But what we have to look at is their record. They crashed the economy under Liz Truss. Why should the British people trust that
viewers will notice that you're not answering my question.
I have answered.
No, my question is, why should they trust your promises on tax and spend? Because hang on a second, because by sticking to the existing rules, the financial rules that you have just said, your costed manifesto when it comes out, the independent think tank, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, says your banking on growth is wishful thinking. Money is so tight, there are three clear choices. You've ruled out one of them, and that is ruling out tax rises. So you're left either with swinging cuts on spending in unprotected departments or increasing debt, which is already at record high levels. So why should people trust you on tax and spend?
Let's be clear about something. What we've had is 14 years of underinvestment. We know that there are businesses waiting to invest, but the political instability and the economic uncertainty and the chopping and changing of policies has knocked confidence, and investors are waiting to see what happens post-election. And I meet investors all the time. My colleagues do. They want to invest in our country, but they need the policy stability and clarity. They need credibility in the management of our economy, which they haven't had. And that is how you get investment and growth. And that's why it's vital that we get a stable economic policy and we respect the independence of the institutions that are there to provide that credibility.
Well, let me ask the same
investment.
Let me ask the same question of Munira and the Liberal Democrats. Why should voters trust you on the issue of tax? Because the last time the Lib Dems were in government, it was in coalition with the Conservatives, where you presided over years of austerity in public spending.
Well, when we were in government, we implemented what was on the front page of our manifesto, which was to lift those on the lowest incomes out of tax altogether.
And abolish
tuition fees. And it was a Liberal Democrat policy to increase the threshold at which people started to pay tax. And we fought hard for that and we implemented that. And since we came out of government, you've seen the Tories freeze those thresholds, which is why we've now got people, families up and down the country, having to shoulder the highest tax burden since the war. And so going into this election, the Liberal Democrats manifesto will be about how we raise taxes fairly, not on working families who are in the midst of a cost of living crisis, but reversing things like the cuts to the bankers' surcharge, which would raise up to £3.9 billion per annum by 28-29, closing the loopholes in the windfall tax. This morning I've been talking about how we would treble the tax on our digital services
we're going to
tax
come on to that.
to be able to pay for mental health services for our children.
You've set out your
those
stall.
Are just some of the examples.
You've all set out your stall on these all-important issues around the economy and tax and spend. Annabelle, how honest are the political parties being with the public over this?
I think voters will struggle to see these promises on taxes as anything other than hollow. They understand that the tax burden is set to reach its highest level in 7 decades. They understand that almost record investment is going into public services, and yet they're crumbling. They understand that debt has absolutely ballooned and that something needs to give. And what I worry about is that we're not doing enough on the government spending side of the ledger. There doesn't seem to be any political appetite to try and rein that in, despite the fact that it's reached above 40% of GDP. We are coming to historic levels of government spending as a proportion of GDP, and yet we've got the main parties making all sorts of promises. The Conservatives, free childcare for all children from 9 months and above. The Labour Party, they want to renationalise rail. They want to spend billions of pounds on various green projects. I think the public understand that these are not realistic promises. And it's all very well saying that they're not going to cut taxes, they're not going to cut spending, they're not going to borrow more, but something ultimately is going to have to give.
Let's talk about Diane Abbott. It's across a number of the front pages. The veteran Labour politician who was suspended from the party for comments she made about race. She's been readmitted to the party, but says she's being blocked by the Labour Party from standing as a candidate for them in this election. Here are some of the front pages. The Guardian. Abbott defies Starmer with vow to remain MP for as long as possible. This is the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Abbott, I will not be intimidated by Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. And finally in the Eye, Abbott dares Starmer, try to stop me from standing in the constituency she has represented for decades. Well, last night she was at a rally in the constituency she's represented in Hackney, and this is some of what she said.
I have been a loyal member of my party. I have also been a representative of the party, first as a councillor and then as a Member of Parliament, for nearly 40 years. So I was shocked to learn yesterday that I am going to be banned from running for the Labour Party.
Brushonara, watching those pictures and listening to Diane Abbott, how did it make you feel?
Look, Diane Abbott is a trailblazer. She deserves the utmost respect and care. And she's opened doors for people like me and many others. And she's an iconic figure. And I think that it's really important that we recognise the contribution that she has made to our country.
Do you think she's been treated well by the Labour Party?
I am really glad that the investigation has been concluded and she's been reinstated in the party, and it's very clear, it's been made very clear that there has been no attempt to ban her from standing.
She thinks
and
so.
I hope that, well, it's been made clear yesterday that there has been no attempt to ban her, and I hope that this is resolved as quickly as possible by the NEC. All candidates will have to be approved, every one of us, by the NEC and get the go-ahead to stand, and that will be happening in the coming days, and I hope this is resolved as quickly as possible.
You say you want to see her being dealt with care and respect. Do you think that's how she has been treated by the Labour Party? An investigation that's gone on for a year. Keir Starmer saying that it was ongoing when it had been finished 5 months ago. She went on training on anti-Semitism and then was told that she was being readmitted to the party only once Rishi Sunak called a snap election. And now, let's put it at best, there is confusion over her status. And there she is as a trailblazer, as you have said, blazed a trail for women like you within the party, standing there saying that she has been mistreated.
Well, look, the process for complaints is independent. No MP is involved with that. So I can't get into, and I'm not aware of the details of that process. What I think is really important is that she's been readmitted, that the decisions around candidates for the general election is made as quickly as possible. I am not, from what we have been informed yesterday, she has not been banned from standing, and the decision by the NEC will need to be made as quickly as possible for all candidates.
Would you like to see Diane Abbott stand as the Labour candidate?
This is a matter between Diane Abbott, and she has made clear that she wants to stand, and the NEC will be making that decision on her and every one of us. That is our system. Our ruling NEC makes that decision, not each of us individually.
But Jess Phillips has come out and said, I would like to see Diane Abbott stand as a Labour candidate. Would you like to see her stand as a Labour candidate?
Well, we would all like to, those of us who've decided to stand and made clear we want to stand, we would all like the NEC
but as a trailblazer, as you said, would you like to see Diane Abbott standing as a Labour candidate?
If that is what Diane Abbott wants to do, the NEC will take that into, all of us have expressed our wish to stand, and we are waiting, like Diane, I am waiting to get approved by the NEC.
Right, I mean, she's not the only potential candidate who seems to be on the wrong side of the Labour Party. Faiza Shaheen was a candidate, now being blocked, again standing in Chingford. She spoke to Newsnight last night. Let's have a look.
I think the Labour Party, because we have the political system that we do, needs to be a broad church. You know, from what I can see that's happening, I would say that, you know, less about the left and more about the message to Muslims and to black people this week. I think it's really not the message that the party wants to send.
Now, she was blocked, or said she was told she was blocked from standing because she had reportedly liked tweets playing down anti-Semitism. So Diane Abbott and Faiza Shaheen are broadly on the left of the party, supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, the former Labour leader. It does look like a purge, doesn't it, of the left?
If there are complaints being made against candidates, whoever they are, there is a process that has to be followed. Otherwise, journalists will quite correctly, and have done in the past, come back and complain about the Labour Party not handling these issues properly. During the process of candidate selection, due diligence will have to be done by all parties. In the last Parliament, we've seen a number of by-elections being triggered because MPs have conducted themselves without following the parliamentary standards. So the issue to do with individual candidates and the due diligence is not a matter for me and other individual MPs. It is a matter for the parties concerned.
You have a view,
I cannot, with the greatest of respect, I
say?
cannot get into the specifics of complaints that are being made. It's not appropriate for MPs to get involved and give a running commentary.
There, Faiza Shaheen is saying, what message does it send the black community and the Muslim community? What do you think it does say?
People need to be properly and treated fairly according to independent processes. That is absolutely paramount. Every party needs to treat candidates of all backgrounds fairly and equally through the due process, and I very much hope and believe that is what will happen. And if those things don't happen, there are within the Labour Party, we set out our concerns, and we have fed those in throughout the Jeremy Corbyn years and subsequently to make sure we get a grip on anti-Semitism and racism and Islamophobia and other issues within our party.
Well, I mean, Annabel, Labour have said they will not accept candidates who fall well below standards expected by the party. So this discussion, which we're having, because it is about an accusation of Labour trying to control the candidate centrally, who represents them and whether they represent their wing of the party. That's the accusation. So is this helping Labour present itself as changed and better able to appeal to a wider electorate?
I'm not sure it is. I think it's serving as a reminder to voters that Labour still seems to have an anti-Semitism problem, or at least once did in the not too distant history. It's problematic for Keir Starmer that Jeremy Corbyn is standing in his old constituency. Just as whatever happens with Diane Abbott, it will be problematic for Keir Starmer. Now, what does his approach say? I would welcome the selection of more moderate Labour candidates. I think that would be better for the country, and it would mean that we may not lose some of the ground that we've gained in areas like the culture wars, for instance. Labour have watered down their Green Prosperity Plan. They've watered down their New Deal for workers. I imagine that they will stick to that path, or more likely to, if there are more moderates in the Labour Party. So that's something to be welcomed. But quite how Keir Starmer reconciles this with his admission earlier this week that he is indeed a socialist, I'm not quite sure. And when it comes to the matter of Diane Abbott, I do feel that, of course, she was a divisive figure, and she clearly remains so, that she probably did deserve to have a more graceful exit from the Labour Party than it appears she is at the moment.
Roshanara?
Look, as I said, I'm a huge admirer of Diane Abbott, and we need to make sure that as a party we support our candidates, and if there are complaints and if there are issues, they're dealt with through independent channels.
Right, well, let's talk about the policy that Labour does want to talk about, and that is putting 13,000 more neighbourhood police and PCSOs, community officers, on the beat. How will they be paid for, Roshanara?
Well, we've already made announcements, and it's fully costed in terms of efficiencies that we will make. We have also set out how we will fund some of the other proposals in terms of non-DOMs and a range of policies that Rachel Reeves set out.
Yeah, but how much
now,
in terms of
the policing, in terms of the policing plan, what we've got is we've announced that there'll be 13,000 PCSOs. That is absolutely vital if we want to bear down on crime. And as I say, every single policy that we have announced has been allocated.
How much will efficiency savings actually make in terms of funding these officers?
Those policies have been set out in a fully costed document, and we will continue to set out other policies which will be costed, unlike the Conservative Party. As I say, the question is why are they not setting out how they're going to pay the announcements they've made, which amount to £71 billion of costs. That's not been set out.
Well, John, more broadly, do you welcome this policy? 13,000 more officers on the beat. They may be officers, some of them existing in back office, but they're going out on the beat, on the streets.
Well, in the last, under the Conservative Party in government, we have recruited something like 20,000 more police officers.
That's because you cut them before.
And actually, I'll give you an example. In my own county of Essex, we have more police officers than any time in the history of the Essex Force, which goes back 170 years. So, I mean, there are a lot of police officers. officers. Now, what Labour are talking about are PCSOs. PCSOs do an important job, but they don't have the full powers of a police officer. And actually, crime has been falling steadily, so we've been getting crime down. And just to answer Roshinara, I would just like to say to Roshinara, she talks about unfunded promises. I think what she's talking about is a very, very long-term objective to get rid of national insurance contributions for employees. That is not in our manifesto. It's a very long-term commitment, and Jeremy Hunt never suggested that it would be deliverable under a government. So it is not a pledge, it is an ambition one day. And we have been very clear that we don't make promises or indeed implement policies which we can't pay for. And the Labour Party have a 38 billion...
Hang on, except on defence. We still haven't heard how you're going to fund this...
The ambition is to get to 2.5%,
There's lots
you're right.
of ambition and hope and belief. That is not credible economic policy.
It is a long-term objective, which obviously, national insurance contributions, I don't expect to achieve that within the course of one
over each other, try and talk to each other.
That's how Liz Truss crashed the economy. Your party didn't respect independent assessments. They didn't do an OBR forecast. They've been failing to account for how your party will pay for things. And what we've had through this programme is you talking about long-term ambition and belief. Very little credibility, and that's very disappointing.
Well, the Labour Party have £38 billion of spending commitments which they have not identified how are going to be paid for. And as we've said, there are other taxes which we know Labour are going to put up. But, for instance, the pledge on police officers, it's not at all clear how that could be delivered. And actually, we are getting crime down now, and we do already have
let's just talk about your claim on
officers.
crime, because you and other politicians in the Conservative Party like to say crime has more than halved since 2010, but that excludes fraud and computer misuse. Those numbers from the Crime Survey for England and Wales also don't include all types of crimes. So when you look at the fastest growing crime, fraud, it's not even in the figures. And most people know somebody, if they haven't experienced it themselves, have been victims of fraud.
Well, it didn't used to be recorded in that way. It's a relatively recent new phenomenon, particularly
but an
with
important
the growth
one.
of online trading and scams. And of course it's important. And actually we're taking separate measures to tackle online fraud. I was involved in some of those when I was a minister last. And it is something which affects people very badly. But if you want to make a comparison...
It also affects your claim that crime has fallen. There are also reports that say burglary is sort of barely investigated these days. The biggest issue is charge rates, which have plummeted since 2015 under the Conservatives. Can you really claim to be the party of law and order when you've presided over this? They plummeted from 16% charge rates in 2015 to 6% in 2024.
Look, I quite accept we've got more to do, but the solutions, some of which the Labour Party themselves are proposing, like having more police officers, is exactly something that we have done.
But you got rid of them.
No, we haven't. As I've just said, we have more police officers.
They have been replaced since then, but they were got rid of during
charges,
the years that you were in government.
Are an all-time low. Knife crime has gone up by 80% since 2015.
And one of the ways you tackle knife crime is by bringing in more stop and search, and that is something that the Labour Party has been opposed to.
For the last 14 years.
Let me bring in Munira. What is your offer when it comes to tackling
crime?
Well,
we've always been championing more visible community policing, because we know that police officers on the ground, whether they're constables or community support officers, are intelligence-led in order to be able to tackle crime and build relationships in the community to be able to solve crimes. But John talks about the fact that he thinks that there's record numbers of police officers. If you ask anybody, they don't feel that. People don't see a visible police presence on their streets, whether they're individuals, whether it's domestic burglaries, homes being burgled, or just last week I was talking to a business...
But you're not pledging new officers, are you? As you say, you want more visibility, but they aren't new police officers.
Well, we will be pledging new officers, and that will be clear in our manifesto when it comes out. But let's not forget that every single day, 6,000 cases are being closed without being solved. And just last week I was talking to an independent shop in my constituency, £20,000 worth of stock nicked overnight, and the police just weren't able to help or take it forward, even though there was footage. There is a serious resourcing issue that needs to be tackled, and people need to see that visible police presence on our streets.
Well, Munira, you're here in the studio, but the Liberal Democrat leader has been out and about. Having fun. Let's put it that way. And Hannah Miller, our correspondent for the BBC, has been following him on the campaign bus. There she is. Hello to you, Hannah. So another day and another Ed Davies stunt, I understand.
Absolutely, yes. He does look to be having quite a lot of fun, doesn't he? Perhaps compared to some of the other party leaders, not taking himself too seriously. We actually asked him about it earlier and sort of said, you know, is there a risk of all of these stunts getting in the way of the policies that you're trying to announce? And his response was essentially that he thinks that politicians should take people seriously, but they don't necessarily need to take themselves too seriously. He was out doing a slip and slide in Frome earlier, getting quite wet, not just because it was raining. He did it more than once, very happy to get involved as ever. I actually heard him saying that he enjoyed it more than he thought he would do. And of course, earlier in the week, we had him paddleboarding. He's been freewheeling down a hill as well on a bicycle in mid-Wales. So having quite a good time, I think, and hoping. The Lib Dem strategy clearly is that these kind of moments get them in the headlines, get them visibility, and ultimately that eventually translates into votes.
Yes, we're enjoying the pictures again of Ed Davey on the paddleboard. I hope you're as energetic as he is if you're on the trail with him taking part in some of these stunts. And here he is freewheeling, slightly cautious here, wisely probably, not wanting to come off. He'll be exhausted by the end of this campaign, won't he, Hannah?
Yeah, he doesn't seem it just yet, but we did ask if he'd checked his brakes worked yesterday, and fortunately he had done. I've had a go myself at the slip and slide this morning as well, just for the fun of it. Why not if you're there? And he was even up for doing interviews on the paddleboard as well, which we gave a go. So, you know, he is kind of doing these things, having a laugh, having a smile, and like I say, trying to get serious messages across at the same time.
Right, Hannah Miller, thank you very much there. Looking dry and warm there on the coat. Does he look unserious, though, Munira? I mean, is there a risk that trying to attract headlines with these sorts of stunts detracts from what are important messages to the public?
Well, actually, when I'm out knocking on doors, one of the things that's fed back to me, as well as people being utterly fed up with the Tories and wanting to kick them out, is there are actually a lot of voters who are pretty switched off from politics and don't want to engage. And if this kind of photo op or stunt, whatever you want to call it, gets people's attention to talk about the serious issues. When it's about when he's paddleboarding, we're talking about the filthy sewage that's going into our rivers and seas, and the fact that we need to take far stronger action. The Tories have let us down on that. Whether today the slip and slide, he's talking about children's mental health. It is a way of capturing people's attention because, let's face it, you love to frame this election as a Labour versus Tory contest. If it enables us to get a serious message across, particularly to members of the public who aren't necessarily engaged.
Do you think it works, that?
No, I know that there's the old adage that there's no such thing as bad publicity, but I struggle to believe that this isn't doing more harm than good, and it's coming at a time when the landscape on the left of British politics is changing enormously. I know we've got a Green Party candidate on later. You know, the Lib Dems are not necessarily the default go-to as a protest vote for people who are fed up with the two main parties. So it may well be that through the Davey triathlon, he wants to get serious messages across, but I'm not sure that that is how it's going to play with voters at a time when public trust in politics is at an all-time low. Well,
it helps to get people tuned into our message. And on the seriousness point, unlike Keir Starmer, actually, Ed Davey has been at the cabinet table before and has shown that he is a serious politician, trebling things like renewable energy when he was in government.
Well, there's a challenge to you, Rishanara.
Well reminded. Ed Davey with the Liberal Democrats delivered austerity with the Conservatives, and you know what we're seeing now is a party that's not serious. The country has had so many shocks, self-inflicted by the Conservatives with the Liz Truss crash. We've got public services really struggling, cost of living crisis, and we've got the Lib Dem leader pulling stunts. What we need is a Labour government.
But talking about the issues that matter to people, whether that's a crumbling NHS and care service, sewage in our rivers, or a cost of living crisis. And actually, at every inflection point in this Parliament, when there's been a crisis, it's been the Liberal Democrats that have led the way. We were the first ones to call, for instance, for a windfall tax. We were the first to call for windfall tax on energy companies when we hit the energy crisis to put a price cap on people's energy bills. You followed suit a bit after that, and then the Tory party have implemented a watered-down version of that.
All right, well, let me just show you this, John, in The Guardian. Lib Dems are go. It's a column by Marina Hyde, and they've already done the joke. Paddleboard on Tuesday, bike on Wednesday. Their slogan could be, yeah, but you're talking about us, aren't you? And we are.
Well, we are, but I'm not sure it helps them much. You know, of course politicians want to display that there is a human side, but actually they are running for serious office. I started my political life a long time ago working for Margaret Thatcher. And the idea that she would have stood on a paddleboard and fallen off to get her message across is unbelievable.
I seem to remember an image of the former Mayor of London on a zip wire looking, well, how can I put it? Some people might say somewhat ridiculous, on a zip wire. He seemed to lean into the same sort of mantra.
He wasn't running for office at the time. He was Mayor of London. It was all about promoting the Olympic Games. This is a serious campaign in which, of course, we need to address the serious issues. Now, there's nothing wrong with showing that you have a sense of humour. Right. But at the moment, all the Liberal Democrats have managed to achieve is a succession of pieces of footage of Ed Davey falling off things. I don't see that is helping them get a serious message across.
I mean, what about your policy announcement today, Munira? How does it help these sorts of election stunts when you're talking about having mental health practitioners in every single school?
Well, it's half term. There were lots of children there having fun, as they should be, but unfortunately too many children are not having fun. We know that 1 in 5 children, that's on average 6 in every classroom, are struggling with their mental health, languishing on waiting lists. The latest data shows us that almost 340,000 children have been waiting on average, up to 15 months, on average 6 months for mental health support. And by putting a dedicated qualified mental health practitioner in every primary and secondary school helps tackle these issues early. Early intervention is prevention.
I asked Rushanara about costing on the policing policy. How would you pay for it?
So the policy itself would cost about £620 million per year. We've said we would pay for that by trebling the digital services tax. That's a tax that's levied on social media and tech giants. That would raise a lot more than that.
But most of these companies are in the United States, aren't they? The reality is you're not going to be able to go ahead with this.
We already taxed them. That was introduced in 2020 at a rate of 2%. We think they should be paying more because, after all, we know that the social media giants and the tech companies are fueling a lot of these problems that we are seeing in young people now.
Right, but whether it's achievable or not is highly debatable. I mean, the United States government wouldn't want it, these companies wouldn't want it, it could damage the British economy. But on the principle, Labour's also promising mental health practitioners in secondary schools, so presumably you welcome this. It's obviously a need.
We have made that announcement in secondary schools, and then in primary schools there's a slight variation of that, and also within the NHS we're prioritising the need for mental health professionals, increasing those numbers because there's a massive crisis. So we're very much focused on that, and we have made that announcement.
Because one of the problems is, of course, absentee levels in schools, which has happened since the pandemic. Well, it's certainly increased, and that's been on your watch, on the Conservatives' watch.
Well, the pandemic was whilst we were in government, yes, but we weren't responsible for it.
No, I mean the absentee levels in schools.
I fully accept that mental health in schools is a very serious issue. And we want to see more mental health support for children at school.
But you're not making a pledge similar to the Liberal Democrats.
We're not going to put up tax. I mean, the Liberal Democrats have come up with another tax which they want to oppose. Actually, I don't think it would be beneficial for the British economy to tax some of the most important investors in this country who are creating millions of jobs and also who are at the forefront of research into things which are absolutely going to transform
we have a mental health
the economy
emergency.
of this country.
We have a mental health emergency. Just in the last 2 months, I've had one teenager in my constituency commit suicide, and I've heard about scores of others who are regularly ending up in A&E trying to do so. It's about priorities and choices. And we're saying, actually, working people shouldn't pay more tax to be able to fund a policy like this. Actually, the big tech giants who are causing these problems should be made to pay for some of the problems that they're causing.
We've taken a lot of action to make sure that children and vulnerable people are protected online. I was involved in the passage of the Online Safety Act, which is a absolutely sort of world-leading piece of legislation to deal with exactly that. But mental health isn't just about online. It's certainly not making it any easier, but the general issue of trying to support children with mental health problems, I fully accept, is something that we need to be concentrating on and where we are actually doing quite a lot.
How worried are you by the threat of the Liberal Democrats in what we call the blue wall, formerly safe Conservative parts of the country? I mean, there is a real tussle between Conservatives and Liberal Democrats in about 85 seats. Could topple some pretty high-profile cabinet ministers.
Well, the problem with the Liberal Democrats is, firstly, they have made clear that if elected, they will support a Labour government. They have said very clearly they will not enter into coalition with a Conservative government. So if you're voting Labour for a Liberal Democrat, you are essentially voting for Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister.
Munira?
No, you're voting for a local Liberal Democrat champion who'll stand up for you in Parliament when the Tories have taken them for granted for so many years, whether that's just down the road from me in places like Esher and Walton, Wimbledon, Winchester, and Greater Manchester and Cheadle and Hazel Grove. These are all constituencies where we are competitive, where we will be putting forward a strong Liberal Democrat offer. We've heard one of the key offers of that for that.
You won't form a government. You'll be supporting a Labour government.
We will be there on our own manifesto in championing the local areas that we represent and standing up for liberal values in Parliament, as we have done through this Parliament.
Right, but on big issues, let's say Labour wins the election, on the budget or any sort of key policy areas, you're going to back a Labour government.
Well, we'll see what they come forward with. I'm sure there'll be areas of a Labour budget we wouldn't agree with. We're standing on a Liberal Democrat manifesto. We are not standing on any sort of coalition manifesto. We stand on our own policies and principles and values, and you will see that manifesto unveiled in the coming weeks.
Liberal Democrats are confident in what we call the blue wall, as I described earlier, and they are contesting many seats where it is going to be a straight fight between Conservatives and Liberal Democrats. How well do you think they could do in terms of profile there?
I have my doubts, actually. I think this could be the election that rules the Liberal Democrats out from being the third party in British politics. But, you know, let's see whether they do end up being kingmakers, as indeed they were in 2010. A problem I think that the party has is that people don't really know what they stand for. And if you look at some of the literature that comes to your letterbox, they are, on the one hand, promising that they will build more houses in order to help young people get onto the housing ladder, which is a massive issue in Britain today. But on the other hand, they're making all sorts of promises about blocking building, or indeed championing the occasions during which they have blocked building in a local constituency.
Are running councils up and down the country. We have a brilliant record of house building, whether that's in the Lake District, whether that's down in Cambridgeshire or Kingston.
But you've also been very proud of the times that you've blocked construction of new houses and other vital infrastructure.
Well, I'd love to know whether everybody on the panel thinks that you should just build a house anywhere.
I'll ask them.
For anybody. We don't want to see big luxury developments on Greenbelt. What we need to see is affordable housing for key workers and young people who are struggling
Only for key workers and young people?
No, for everyone, but particularly in my constituency where I've been campaigning for affordable housing for key workers and young people who are being driven out the area because they can't afford to live in it.
All right, well, while we're talking about the Green Belt and housing, let's go to Bristol, where the Green Party are launching their election campaign. We've had a few technical issues, but I think we can now talk to their candidate for Brighton Pavilion, Sian Berry. Welcome to you, Sian. We've asked all of the politicians representing their respective parties when they first appear to give us a 30-second pitch for the Greens to our viewers. So please, take the floor.
I mean, after 14 years of driving our public services into the ground, people are crying out for change, but Labour are not offering the change that people want. People are feeling quite hopeless about the fact that Labour are offering only tweaks to Conservative policies. Greens are here to be that bold voice offering hope in that election. Green MPs will be there challenging Labour, and people can see how vital a voice that is. We'll be there pushing for more investment in the NHS, more action on the growing climate crisis, more action on housing and the right to an affordable home and cleaner water. These are the mainstays of things that we're hearing on the doorstep.
I know it's difficult to gauge, but your 30 seconds is up. But Caroline Lucas has been the sole Green MP for 14 years or so, and the only MP your party has ever returned. You want 4 MPs elected in this election alone. What makes this year different for you?
Well, we've seen our number of councillors growing virtually exponentially in the last few years. They've gone up 5-fold in the last 5 elections. We can see that lots of other places in the country are ready to elect Green MPs. We're focused on 4 constituencies in this election. We're expecting to see growth this year and in the next election and in the next election after that.
All right, I think
People, when they elect Greens, they like what they see.
All right, well, you say that, but as I say, Caroline Lucas has been the sole Green MP. You have just reiterated an underline what we've heard from Green politicians, which is about the need to push the next government, and if the polls are right, it will be Labour, for bold action. If it is Labour who wins the election, what policies specifically do you want to push them on?
Well, where they're falling short at the moment, and from issues that people are raising to me on the doorstep, is NHS investment. People are worried about the future of the NHS, the creeping privatisation that Labour are saying they want to continue with, and the cuts in green investment. Those things are coming up particularly strongly. And then on the water companies, they can see that Labour's plans on that fall a long way short of what's needed. We need those companies back in public hands. We don't just want to be stopping the bonuses of the directors. We actually need to be seizing those companies and making sure that we invest what we need so that we've got clean water and a sustainable water supply for the future. So what could be more fundamental?
So broadly, you want to reduce Labour's vote in this election?
Well, we're aiming to keep our Green seat, we're aiming to gain a Labour seat in Bristol, and we're aiming for 2 Conservative seats. So there is a range of different votes we're trying to gain.
Rushanara, how worried are you? We have Rushanara Ali here, candidate in this election for Labour. Rushanara, what do you say to Sian? This is going to be a serious pressure on Labour politicians like you, isn't it, in this election, as shown in the local elections in May?
Well, look, this election is a straight fight between the Conservatives and Labour, and it's a choice about whether people want a change in government, a changed Labour Party to serve this country and to restore growth, to rebuild our economy, rebuild our public services. And the Greens and Independents, who are challenging MPs, are frankly going to damage our chances if they get a foothold. And where that is the case, the public, I hope, will look at what they want ultimately. Do they want 5 more years of Conservative government, or do they want a changed Labour government and a Labour Party? And our plan on green issues is that we've got very radical plans. We're going to co-invest with the private sector in green green technology as well as decarbonisation. We want to see energy bills reduced by investing.
All right. Well, let Sian respond to what Rushanara has said about the offer
we can
to
deliver
the
a foreign government.
Sian?
Well, 100% of the polls are saying that Labour are going to have a massive majority, and people are worried that Labour, with all the power, won't live up to what people need. Their green plans have already been cut back. People know that they're going to be a better government with Greens holding them to account, scrutinising them and giving them the good ideas that are in our manifesto. That's how Greens work around the country, and that's how we'll work in Parliament too. We'll be a constructive opposition, and the opposition that Labour really needs in order to be better.
I mean, Rushanara, YouGov poll published this week put the Conservatives in 3rd place among voters under 50, with the Green Party moving into 2nd place. So, as I say, how worried are you that they are going to take seats from you and split the vote?
It's really crucial that we get a good, strong working majority, and that's why it's vital that people look at this in terms of which party they want in government. And the Labour Party has got a very clear set of plans, both on the green agenda, on creating green jobs, decarbonising our economy, making sure that we meet the climate transition, and we want to turn around our country, we want to restore hope, and we want to make sure that we are in a better place as a country for the decades to come.
Sian,
and the Greens need to...
All right, let me bring in Munira Wilson for the Liberal Democrats. Sian, Munira is here. And so you had a deal with the Greens, or there was a sort of broad consensus in the last election that you wouldn't stand candidates where, again, you might split the vote on the sort of progressive alliance. What about this time?
No deals. We'll be standing in every seat.
Right. Would you be interested in some sort of agreement, Sian, with the Liberal Democrats?
We are also standing in every seat. We need a better voting system. And the collaboration that happened last time was all about that. We need to get more Greens, more people that properly represent the votes that people cast across the country in Parliament. That way we can have a more mature democracy, one where people's views are genuinely represented. And I'm happy to work with parties who want that. And I think that Labour members do want that. So I think Labour should be listening.
Sian Berry, thank you very much. Throughout the election, of course, we'll be speaking and scrutinising the different parties on their offer to voters at the election, and have a range of views and opinions expressed from other guests too. I'll be back tomorrow at 12:15 with more. Bye.
Lock yourself away with a true crime podcast.